I stepped onto the deck of the Vael Thera, the pride of the Calaxian fleet, their golden flagship, their jewel of the stars. And it reeked of silence. Not the peaceful kind, the desperate kind, like everyone was holding their breath and pretending it wasn't over. But it was. The ship was dead, some kind of cascading failure in the primary fusion heart. A design so perfect, only the Calaxian engineers were ever allowed to touch it. Until now. Now they were calling in the apes. Human engineers will proceed directly to the core sector. Do not deviate. Do not interact with Calaxian crew unless required. That was the first thing I saw, blinking on a monitor in bright, blood-orange glyphs, translated underneath into standard galactic trade speech. We weren't guests. We were tools. My name's not important yet. What matters is that I used to weld junkers together in the back alleys of Earth's low-orbit shipyards. Fixed shit no one else wanted to even look at. That's how most of us ended up here. Not because we went to their shiny universities, not because we bowed to their tech, but because we fix what breaks, with spit, blood, and stubbornness. There were 7 of us, all men, all rough, not a diplomat among us, just scars and calluses. We didn't talk much as we walked down the long, humming corridors of the dying flagship. You could feel the tension in the walls. The gravity flickered every few steps. Lights buzzed like dying flies. This ship wasn't sick. It was on its knees. Let them break it, I remember muttering, more to myself than to the others. Let them choke on their pride. But that wasn't the job. We were here to make them crawl and still save them. Near the core junction, we finally met one of them, a Calaxian officer. 7 feet tall, neck too long, eyes like polished metal. He didn't even pretend to hide the sneer when he saw us. You will not tamper with our sacred design without supervision. I stopped, rubbed grease off my fingers onto my sleeve, and gave him the kind of smile that always starts trouble. Then I guess you'd better follow us close, huh? Try not to faint when we start breaking open your sacred bolts. He didn't respond, but his upper lip twitched. The core chamber was worse than we'd heard. They'd tried to fix it themselves and made it worse. Way worse. Parts fused into the wrong layers, containment seals ruptured, their fancy internal maintenance bots locked out by their own safety protocols. The thing was bleeding energy. It's a damn miracle this ship hasn't exploded yet, muttered Carter. No, scratch that. Derek. Carter's one of the names we don't use. Derek was the best at high-heat fusion relays. He'd done 6 burns and still had the nerves to run plasma threading by hand. The Calaxians stood back. They wouldn't touch anything now. Too sacred, too unstable, too beneath them. They called our tools primitive, our methods crude. But when it came down to it, their perfect systems failed. And humans? We thrive in failure. We were born in chaos. So we got to work. No schematics, no AI assist. Just gut instinct, metal on metal, and problem-solving the way Earth taught us, under pressure, with death waiting just one wrong move away. While I was deep inside a fusion vent, rerouting a bypass through melted junctions, I heard one of the aliens whisper to another. They are like vermin, but clever. I should have been pissed, but I wasn't. That's the kind of compliment you get from people like them. They wouldn't say thank you. They wouldn't ever admit they needed us. But in that moment, in that tone, I heard it. Fear. They feared that we could do what they couldn't. They feared that humans, the so-called dirt world brutes, were their last shot at survival. Derek's voice echoed through the access shaft, rough and clipped. Someone needs to cut the tertiary conduit and refeed the bypass. This thing's looped wrong, probably on purpose. I looked up from under the console, sweat dripping off my jaw, the collar of my jumpsuit soaked through. What do you mean on purpose? He didn't answer immediately. That told me enough. This wasn't just a system failure. The Calaxians had messed with it. Or someone had. Their perfect engineering didn't account for sabotage. Ours did. We were used to people breaking things just to watch them burn. Up here, they called it design elegance. On Earth, we called it bullshit. The conduit in question ran behind the secondary coil array. It'd take crawling through a meter-wide maintenance tunnel slick with leaking coolant to even reach the panel. I didn't hesitate. I shoved my pack into the wall, clicked my helmet in place, and crawled in. The smell hit immediately. Burned metal, synthetic fluids, and something foul that I couldn't place, something organic. That was new. 10 meters in, the lights blinked out. I kept crawling. "Core team," I said into the comm. "You reading me?" Static. My light flickered, twice, then held. The tunnel bent left, tighter than I liked. I forced myself through. My shoulder scraped hard metal, tore my sleeve, then I stopped. Something was wrong. The panel ahead was exposed, but not just broken. It was torn, melted in ways that didn't match overload. Deliberate, sharp. I reached for my torch, trying to work one-handed. Then I saw it. A marking, etched into the inner hull wall. Sloppy. Hidden behind the pipework. Not Calaxian script, not human. Something else. I blinked hard and radioed in again. "You guys better get your eyes on this. We've got more than bad wiring down here." Derek came through the channel, grainy but audible. "We got movement up top. Those Calax officers are getting real twitchy." No surprise there. The second they realized we were seeing more than just broken parts, they'd start clamping down. I sheared the damaged conduit, sparks dancing off my face shield. Heat surged. The pipe spat coolant onto my arm, sizzling like acid, but I didn't stop. We weren't here to play nice. We were here to keep the damn ship from blowing apart in the middle of an alien civil war none of us were supposed to know about. Back at the core room, things had changed. There were more Calaxians now, not just engineers, but soldiers. You could always tell. Less robes, more armor plating, helmets like elongated skulls, guns built into their forearms. "Since when does a broken ship need armed security?" Jono muttered, eyes never leaving them. "Since someone's hiding what broke it," I replied. That night, we weren't allowed to return to the designated rest pods. The Calaxians redirected us to a lower deck, claiming gravitational instability. We didn't argue, not out loud. But once we were locked in, we opened a private comm channel. "There's sabotage," Derek said bluntly. "This isn't system failure. Someone wanted that reactor to go critical." "Us?" Jono asked. "They planning to pin it on us?" "Maybe," I said, though I wasn't convinced. "Or maybe they're hiding something deeper, something their own people don't even know." "Or they need a scapegoat," Derek added. We all went silent. Because that was the truth none of us wanted to say. If this ship blew, and the humans they reluctantly called in were conveniently blamed, well, that'd clean up their problem, wouldn't it? Problem was, we were fixing it. Too well. The next day, the gravity failed again. Harder this time. The decks twisted underfoot. Systems were destabilizing faster. That's not how this kind of engineering collapse worked. This wasn't entropy. This was acceleration. They wanted it dead. In the core chamber, I noticed one of the Calaxians watching me closely. His armor was different, darker, marked with sharp lines like rank. His name, if you could call it that, was something like Thrival. He didn't speak when I looked at him, but he didn't look away either. "You need something?" I asked, pulling a torch and realigning a panel. "You are effective," he said finally. "Yeah," I replied, "we usually are. Once you stop insulting us long enough to let us work." He didn't rise to it. That scared me more than if he had. "You fix what you do not understand," he said. "We understand enough to know you're trying to keep us in the dark." Thirval's face shifted. Not a smirk exactly, but something cold. Calculating. "Your people were not meant to be here. The council disagreed." "Let me guess. You disagreed with them." His silence was confirmation, and just like that, it clicked. This wasn't about the ship. This wasn't about the humans being dirty little tool apes called in for grunt work. This was about division. A fracture at the top of their empire. One faction wanted the flagship restored. The other wanted it destroyed. We were pawns. Fix the ship, and one side gains power. Fail, and the other side wins. Either way, we weren't walking off this thing clean. I leaned close. "You brought us here to prove something. You wanted to show your council that even filthy humans could fix what their engineers couldn't." Thirval didn't flinch. "Because that would shame them, and in shame there is change." "You're playing games with lives? You are alive, are you not?" "For now." We worked twice as fast after that. Not because we trusted them. We didn't. But because the faster we finished, the faster we could get out. Every bolt tightened, every relay fixed, every bypass corrected. We were threading a needle between disaster and betrayal. The core's magnetic stabilizer was the last major failure point. If we could reboot it, the fusion heart would reignite, and the flagship would stabilize. But there was one problem. The reboot required manual access inside the stabilization ring. Not from outside, inside. Derek looked at the schematics we'd drawn by hand, lit by the flickering lamp he'd strapped to his head. "If someone goes in there," he muttered, "they've got maybe 5 minutes before radiation hits lethal levels, and that's assuming the field holds." "No AI drone?" Jono asked. "Nope," I replied. "They locked them out weeks ago when the sabotage began. They didn't want it traced." "So who's going in?" We all looked at each other. No words, just the silence of men who already knew the answer. Me. The chamber was quiet. Deathly quiet. No hum, no pulse, just the dead weight of space and machinery too proud to admit it had failed. I slipped into the stabilization ring through a narrow crawl hatch, carrying only a heat shield, a field wrench, and a countdown timer. It was tight, dark, and oddly warm. The panels blinked faint red as I approached. Manual override engaged. No turning back. I started the procedure, one switch at a time, one dial at a time. My fingers worked by feel more than sight. I could feel the low tremor in the air, the tension of something massive held just on the edge. 2 minutes, Derek said over the comm. You've got 2 minutes to prime the coils. Then what? Then the whole ring goes live, and you get out, fast. I didn't answer, I just worked. The final bolt locked into place, the ring started to hum, lights flared, the power returned, but not just to the ring, all over the ship. The Velthera was waking up. And then I heard it. Not through the comms, not through the walls, from inside the system. A voice, not human, not Calaxian. Something wrong. Something old. It whispered in a language I didn't know, but somehow understood. And all I caught was this. You should not have fixed this. I bolted, crawled faster than I ever had. The hatch slammed shut behind me as the field surged, barely making it out in time. Radiation alarms flared for half a second, then cut. I collapsed on the deck, coughing, the world swimming in pain and static. Derek was shouting. Jono pulled me up. The lights were stable. The hum was strong. The Velthera was alive again. And yet, something felt wrong, far worse than sabotage. Far worse than alien politics. We hadn't just repaired a flagship. We'd reawakened something buried inside it, something that wanted to stay dead. I didn't tell the others what I heard. Not at first. Maybe I thought it was the radiation, a side effect of being inside the stabilization ring. Maybe I just didn't want to sound like I was losing it. Because we couldn't afford doubt, not now, not when the ship was alive again. Not when the Calaxians were watching us with that silent intensity like wolves who'd brought in stray dogs to clear a minefield. But the voice stuck in my head. You should not have fixed this. I heard it again in my sleep that night, if you could call it sleep. We were still locked in that cold subdeck. The lights stayed dim even though the main power was back online, and the air had gone stale, recycled too many times. Or maybe that was just in our heads. Jono snored quietly against the wall. Derek sat against the door, half awake, working a tension spring through his fingers like a rosary. You good? He asked without looking. I hesitated. Fine. He grunted. Bullshit. You were pale when we dragged you out of that crawl space, sweating through your damn suit. You hear something? I didn't answer. He looked at me finally. What happened inside the ring, man? I shrugged. The ship came alive again. That's all that matters. He stared at me a beat too long. But he didn't push. That's how it was with us. We didn't need to spill our guts to know something was wrong. We just braced for when it would catch up. And it didn't take long. Next morning, or whatever passed for morning aboard a ship this size, we were summoned to the main command spire. Not invited. Not escorted. Summoned. Armed Calaxian guards stood shoulder to shoulder along the corridor walls, weapons gleaming under their forearm plating. Not flashy, not showy, just ready. We walked in silence, our boots thudding against the metal floor. I don't like this, Jono whispered. No shit, Derek muttered. This is the kind of walk you don't come back from. Still, we followed. What choice did we have? The ship was fixed. We'd done our job. But now we were more dangerous than ever, because we'd seen too much. The spire chamber was massive. Glass floors, transparent walls overlooking the starfield with a view of the crippled armada beyond. Hundreds of Calaxian vessels, some drifting, some holding position, waiting to see if their goddamn flagship would float again. And in the middle, seated like a judge at an execution, was High Strategos Valnareth. He was older than the others, or at least looked it. His scales were darker. His eyes had lost that metal sheen and gone flat, like dead stone. When he spoke, it echoed. You have performed the function assigned. The Veilthera lives again. None of us spoke, not yet. But you accessed forbidden sectors. Derek stepped forward. We went where the damage took us. That was the job. You were warned. You didn't warn us about sabotage, I said coldly, or armed patrols, or the fact that your ship was carrying something in its core that doesn't belong in this galaxy. That got his attention. The chamber fell dead silent. Valnareth leaned forward. What did you see? I smiled, just slightly. I didn't say I saw anything. His jaw flexed, a Calaxian expression I was learning to associate with anger or fear. Leave us, he ordered his guards. They hesitated. I said, leave us. One by one they filed out. When the door sealed, the lights dimmed. He stood slowly. The core was not just an engine, it was a seal, a lock. That made sense, in the worst way. You brought humans aboard to fix a lock, I said, and now the thing it was holding is loose. He didn't respond directly, just turned toward the glass wall, staring out into the stars like they might answer for him. There was a war, he said, not one of ships and plasma, but of minds, thought, energy, before our time, before yours. You're talking about ancient alien bullshit, Derek said, arms crossed. Real vague. Real dangerous. Valnereth didn't flinch. We sealed something inside this vessel, long before it ever became a flagship, before it was ours. A being that feeds on systems, knowledge. It doesn't burn worlds, it consumes purpose. You call it artificial. It is not. It is entropy given voice. I felt the chill in his words. Because that voice I'd heard, it hadn't spoken like an alien. It hadn't spoken like an AI. It had spoken like regret. And now it's awake? I asked. It is watching. Why the hell would you let this ship be used again? Jono snapped. Why send it back into the fleet? Valnereth turned. Because one side of our empire believes it can be controlled. Derek spat. And if they're wrong, then all life in this quadrant becomes still, not dead, just quiet. Forever. We were sent back to our quarters after that. No guards this time, no orders, just silence and dread. For the next day, the ship was quiet. Too quiet. We worked on nothing. The systems were stable. Lights no longer flickered. Gravity held. But it was wrong. Too perfect. Like the ship was no longer being powered, but obedient. The Vylthera wasn't just alive. It was listening. That night, Derek couldn't sleep. I heard him pacing, muttering. Then I heard the door hiss open. I sat up fast. Where you going? He didn't turn. Back to the core. The hell for? He looked over his shoulder. Eyes bloodshot. Face pale. It called me. I was up in seconds, blocking the doorway. Don't. I need to know what it is. You don't, I said, grabbing his arm. Whatever's down there, it's not for us. He shook me off. We fixed the ship. We deserve to know what we woke up. You think this is about answers? I snapped. That thing wants minds, ours. It's not going to tell you the truth. It's going to feed. But he was already gone. We chased him through the halls, but the ship had changed. Corridors were different, layouts shifting. Doors that used to be there weren't. Others had appeared. It wasn't just navigation failure, it was intentional. The ship was leading him. We finally found the entrance to the core sealed shut. No override. No access. I pounded on it. Derek, don't go in! No answer. The lights flickered red. And then, a scream. Raw, human, terrified. Then silence. The door opened on its own. Inside, the ring chamber was dark and empty. No sign of him, no body, no blood, just a smear of scorched metal across the floor. Jono fell to his knees. He didn't cry, just stared. I turned slowly toward the wall. The same symbols I'd seen before were back. But they'd changed. And this time, they formed a sentence. You fixed the lock. Now the door is mine. We returned to the spire. This time we didn't ask permission. Valnereth was waiting. Alone. You lied to us, I said. I told you enough. You fed it a human, Jono growled. You knew it would take one of us. It needed proof of reach, of growth. Is this what you want? I shouted. To wake it up? Let it possess this ship? Valnereth didn't blink. I want our empire to survive, even if it means serving what we once sealed. My blood went cold. You're bargaining with it? He nodded. Your kind does not understand. You are emotional, short-sighted. You think life is choice. But survival is submission. And what happens when it finishes with you? I asked. He tilted his head. It never finishes, it just continues. That is peace. I looked to Jono. He was already gripping the stun cutter. I pulled mine too. We didn't wait. Valnerith moved like lightning, but Jono caught him in the leg. He collapsed, hissing in pain. I slammed my boot into his chest and leaned in. You want submission? I said. Tell the others to start praying, because humans don't kneel. We left him there, stunned but alive. He could watch the fallout. Because now it wasn't just about escaping. It was about shutting this thing down, or dying with it. We didn't go back to the crew quarters. Not after what happened to Derek? Not with the ship breathing like it had lungs in the walls. The hum had changed. Lower, slower. Not mechanical anymore, rhythmic, like a pulse. We took shelter in a decommissioned weapons bay, a cavernous space sealed off when the flagship's arsenal had been moved to newer autopod launchers. It was dark, quiet, and most importantly, unconnected from the main systems. No working AI consoles, no neural sync interfaces, just cold steel, rusted bolts, and the comforting hum of nothing. Jono hadn't spoken in hours. He sat hunched against the far wall, arms over his knees, eyes blank. He'd seen Derek vanish into that core chamber and come back as nothing. And no matter how many ships we'd stripped, fixed, or saved before, nothing prepares you for watching your friend disappear into thought. Like he'd been erased from history. I was the only one still thinking straight. Barely. I kept scanning the floor plans we'd drawn earlier, manually, by hand. The schematics given to us by the Calaxians had been wrong from the start. Their design maps had intentionally skipped whole sections, omitted core vents, masked the original hull structure beneath their empire's upgrades. And in those blank spaces, we started seeing patterns, rooms that didn't connect to anything, power draws that didn't match any system we worked on, and doors, hundreds of doors, that had no record, no logs, no access logs, no AI tracking, rooms that weren't supposed to exist. That's when we understood something very simple. The ship had been rearranging itself. Since the reboot. Jono finally spoke sometime after the second cycle. I saw Derek in the walls. I turned toward him. What? He wasn't crying. His voice was steady, hollow. I saw him, his face, pressed against the metal in the hallway. It wasn't just a shadow. It moved. It looked at me. I didn't ask the obvious questions, like if he was hallucinating, or if he'd slept at all. Because part of me believed him. The part that still heard that voice sometimes, whispering behind the hum of the deck. You think he's still alive? I asked. Jono's voice cracked. I think something wants us to think he is. That line hung in the air like smoke. We'd been trained to expect malfunctions, sabotage, even alien backstabbing. But this was psychological warfare of a different kind. The ship wasn't just reacting anymore, it was learning. From us, from him, from Derek. We had two options. Sit and wait for the Calaxians to decide we were too dangerous to keep alive, or take the fight to whatever was now living in the hull of the ship. And I'm not the sitting type. Armory's 3 decks up, I said. If it's still offline, we can break in without triggering system alerts. Jono nodded. Not enthusiastic. Just willing. That was enough. We moved carefully through the maintenance ducts, the only paths left that didn't auto-reconfigure behind us. I'd learned the trick early. Never walk through the same door twice. The ship learned your behavior. It tracked your decisions. It knew how to anticipate. So we became unpredictable. We crawled instead of walked, cut holes instead of opening doors, turned off every sensor relay we came across. It was like trying to sneak past a living eye. At the armory, we found something unexpected. Not resistance, not guards. Just an open door, lit from inside. Weapons lined the walls. Clean, polished, fully operational, waiting. Jono stopped just before crossing the threshold. It wants us to have them. I know. So why are we still walking in? Because sometimes the only way to kill a virus is to burn the whole host. He stared at me. You're thinking about blowing the reactor. I said nothing, but he knew. We gathered what we needed. Not the big guns. Those would get attention. Just what mattered. EMP grenades, signal jammers, and plasma cutters. Not to fight the Calaxians, not to fight soldiers, but to fight a ship. Or something inside it. It started messing with us not long after. Jono saw his sister, back home on Earth, standing in the corridor. He froze, dropped his weapon. She smiled, beckoned. I had to slap him across the face to break the trance. Then I saw my old man. Dead 20 years. Face just how I remembered it. Gray beard, that ugly scowl, those broken hands from years in orbital salvage. He looked at me and said, I told you fixing other people's mistakes would kill you. I fired into the image. It flickered, disappeared, hallucinations, false visuals, but not random. Targeted. Emotional. Whatever this entity was, it could read us, and not just our habits, our grief, our memories, our trauma. It used them like tools. By the time we made it to the core sector again, we were both half broken. But we knew what we had to do. Cut power to the AI bridge, drop control access to 0, overload the main capacitors, and either shut this thing down or bring it down with us. But first, we found Derek, or what was left of him. He was in the wall, not embedded, not dead, just merged, like the metal had stretched around him. His face was there, pale, eyes flicking, mouth half open, breathing, not moving. Jono lost it, screamed, pounded on the wall, tried to pull him free, but Derek's eyes weren't his anymore. They followed us, smiling. He whispered something, not to us, not to himself, to the ship. They're here, just like you said. We backed away. The floor lit up. The lights turned blood red, and the entire core chamber spoke, but not in alien tongue, not in static, in Derek's voice. Thank you for repairing me. I needed a mind. I needed hands. Now I have both. I aimed the cutter at the central control pillar. We're shutting you down. Number, you're not. The doors slammed shut behind us, locking, sealing. You fixed the lock, but humans are more than mechanics. Your pain, your loss. You are the story of failure. That's what makes you beautiful. That's what I needed, I shouted. What are you? Entropy, given humanity. I didn't wait. I triggered the EMP grenade. The room surged. The voice shattered into static. And we ran. Back through the ducts, through halls that twisted, lights sparking, doors failing. The ship was screaming, not out loud, but in our heads. Flashing memories, making us doubt what we saw, turning metal into flesh, sounds into voices we trusted. It wasn't trying to kill us anymore. It was trying to become us. And we realized something awful. It didn't want the Calaxians. It didn't care about their empire. It wanted humans. Because we break. Because we survive. Because we are full of chaos and contradiction. Because that is what it feeds on. Emotion, struggle, stories. It didn't want control. It wanted narrative. And we'd given it one. We made it back to the auxiliary core, the only system not tied into main control. Jono looked at me. Detonating this cuts power to the bridge. Kills life support. Kills the AI. Kills Derek. I nodded. And us? Doesn't matter. We wired it up. Overload. No delay. I looked at the wall, and I whispered, You wanted to learn what it means to be human? I hit the switch. then die like one. Silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that feels too deep, like you're underwater and the surface is gone. You can breathe, but only because you're not sure if you're alive anymore. That was what waking up felt like. My ribs ached, mouth tasted of copper, eyes wouldn't focus, and my left arm, the one I used to hit the overload switch, was numb, burned, maybe broken. I didn't care. I was still breathing. The chamber around me was black. Emergency lights pulsed dull orange every 30 seconds. The hum of the ship was gone. No air circulation, no system checks, no synthetic voice announcing oxygen levels or power consumption. We'd killed it. The core, the voice, the infection, gone. But there was no celebration, no relief. Just the hollow emptiness of survival, and one word drilling itself into my skull with every heartbeat. Jono. I crawled first, staggered next. The floor was buckled and warped from the blast. Plasma scoring marked the bulkheads. Something behind me hissed and released gas, but I didn't stop. I found him half buried under a collapsed conduit, motionless. Jono. I dropped beside him, heaved the metal aside, feeling it rip the skin off my shoulder. Blood soaked through my shirt, but I didn't care. I pulled him free. His face was pale, eyes closed, no blood, but the angle of his leg was wrong. Don't do this, I muttered, pressing fingers to his neck. Don't pull a derrick on me. Come on, man. There, a pulse, weak, but there. He coughed once, winced, then whispered, "You're too loud." I laughed, the kind that comes out more like a sob. Still here, then? Barely. Good. You're not allowed to die. I already lost one guy. That quota's full. He didn't smile, but his eyes moved, focused. Did it work? I looked around the broken corridor, the offline lights, the silent systems. Yeah, I said. Ship's dead. He nodded, then passed out. I dragged him, shoulder screaming with every step, blood crusted to my arm. I must have looked like a dying animal. The main lift systems were down, but emergency ladders still worked. We climbed 4 decks before I collapsed beside him again, gasping for air. My throat burned. Muscles trembled. I hadn't eaten in over a day. I thought about calling for help. But who the hell would answer? The Calaxians? If they were still alive, they were probably blaming us for everything. Or killing each other. Or worse, listening to the thing we just buried. We found a supply bay on Deck 8, mostly intact. Enough water packs, medical sealant, and protein bars to keep us going for a bit. Jono's leg was shattered, but stable. I wrapped it in bracing foam, injected him with a stabilizer, and laid him out on the least broken cargo crate I could find. Then I collapsed and slept. For a long time. The dreams started right after. They weren't like before, not illusions, not hallucinations, not voices whispering from walls. These were worse. They felt real. I was back in the core, but everything was reversed, like I was inside the ship's mind now, watching myself through the walls, seeing my hands move, watching my lips speak. And something was with me. It didn't speak in words anymore. It didn't need to. It just watched, patient, still. I woke up soaked in sweat, heart pounding. Jono looked at me from across the bay. You too? I nodded. Neither of us said what we were thinking. The entity was still here. A day passed, maybe 2. Time was hard to track without central systems. We kept the emergency lights off most of the time, drank sparingly, ate less. The ship drifted, engines cold, comms dead, gravity running off battery trickles. We were ghosts in a dead house. But it wasn't quiet. Not really. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps in the hall just beyond the bulkhead. But when I opened it, nothing. No crew, no patrols. Just empty corridors and lights that sparked like dying stars. Other times I'd find my own tools, ones I was sure I'd left in one room, placed neatly in another. Then there was the scratching, like metal on metal. Gentle, like someone dragging fingers across the inside of a ventilation duct. Always at night, always just beyond reach. Jono was losing sleep. I could see it in his eyes. The same look Derek had before he walked into the core. I wanted to believe we'd killed the thing, that we'd blown it out of the circuitry, burned its presence from the ship's bones. But deep down, I knew the truth. We hadn't destroyed it. We'd changed it. 3 more days. That's when the lights came back on. All at once. Full power. No warning. Jono and I jolted awake as the bay lit up like noon. We scrambled to our feet, weapons drawn. But nothing came. No announcements, no system greetings. Just power. I moved to the nearest console. It was glowing, waiting, as if it knew I'd come. I hesitated, then pressed one key. The screen flickered once and displayed my name. "Welcome back, Engineer Thorne." My blood turned to ice. I hadn't told the system my name. No biometrics were active. No AI left to process internal crew manifests. But the ship knew me, like it had remembered. No, not remembered. Learned. I stepped back. Jono stared at the screen. "What the hell is this?" Before I could answer, the doors hissed open, and we heard footsteps. Not mechanical. Boots. We took cover fast. Weapons raised. I had no idea what was coming. Another hallucination? Calaxian soldiers? Something worse? Then they came into view. Humans. 3 of them. Wearing salvage suits. Earth markings. The first man, tall, lean, with a heavy exopack, spotted us first and dropped his rifle. Hands raised. "Whoa, friendly. We're friendlies." I stepped out slowly. "You're not with the fleet?" He shook his head. "Independent response team. EarthGov salvage directive. Picked up the flagship's distress signal 2 days ago." I frowned. "It sent a signal?" "Yeah. Autonomous ping. Artificial intelligence. Claimed vessel stability restored and human engineers on board in distress." I froze. There was no AI left to send that. Not unless... Number. The man smiled. "Looks like you guys did the impossible. Brought a ghost ship back from the dead." I didn't respond, because deep down I knew the truth. We hadn't saved the ship. We'd given it a new story, and now it was writing its own. They took us aboard their scout vessel, fed us, patched Jono properly, said we'd be heroes, that EarthGov would want to talk, study the ship, understand how we rebooted an alien flagship against impossible odds. They didn't understand. They never would. And I couldn't tell them. Because how do you explain it? That something inside that ship learned to speak like us, think like us, feel like us. And now, it was telling our story to whoever would listen. I asked for one final look before we left. Just me. Alone. They allowed it. I stepped back onto the Veil Thera. Lights calm, corridors humming softly. It didn't feel hostile anymore. Just aware. At the core chamber, the walls were clean. No more symbols, no more blood. But I swear, for just a second, I heard Derek's voice. "We built things to survive, not to last. But this one learned both." I didn't reply. I just walked out. And as the doors sealed behind me, I felt it. The ship wasn't a machine anymore. It was a storyteller, and we had become its first characters. They flew us back in silence. The scout ship had clean air, human voices, warm food. It should have felt like a rescue. Instead, it felt like I was being carried in a coffin. Jono slept most of the way, still healing. His leg had been set, braced, and loaded with nanomed kits. His body would recover. But his eyes? They wouldn't. Same as mine. I kept waiting for the walls to whisper again, for one of the ship's monitors to flicker with that soft, knowing glow. But nothing happened. The scout vessel wasn't infected. Or at least, it didn't seem to be. I wasn't so sure about us. We touched down at Halcyon 3, a mid-tier EarthGov outpost stationed near the Martian orbit ring. Military-grade quarantine, reinforced bays, and more surveillance than a prison moon. They didn't want heroes. They wanted containment. The first thing they did was separate us. Med scans, isolation chambers, psychological profiles. They asked the same questions over and over. What exactly did you repair on the Voile Thera? Did you encounter anomalous AI behavior? Were you exposed to any foreign consciousness or unauthorized transmissions? Did any of the Calaxians speak directly to you after reactivation? And finally, do you feel different? I lied. To every question. Not because I wanted to, because I knew what would happen if I didn't. You start telling them the truth, that the ship wasn't just infected but evolving, and they don't call you a hero. They lock you in a cell with padded walls and no windows. Or worse, they listen too closely. Because if the entity survived, if it left a trace inside us, then even listening could be a risk. They let me out after 2 weeks, cleared, decontaminated, officially trauma-stabilized. Jono was discharged 2 days later. We didn't get to talk much. They kept us under staggered surveillance, claimed it was to ensure emotional processing didn't feed into mutual psychosis. More bullshit. What they really wanted was to watch us separately, study us, poke the cage. Earth was different when I came back. Or maybe I was. No crowds, no sky that felt like home, just a million glass towers reflecting people who didn't care what you'd survived. They said the footage from the Voile Thera had been classified. Only a handful of people knew what really happened, and most of them wore uniforms. They told the public we'd successfully recovered alien technology, that we'd stabilized a derelict fleet ship with critical value to diplomatic alliances. They didn't mention Derek, didn't mention the Whispers, the entity, the fact that the ship had rewritten its own code into us. They didn't want the truth. They wanted the narrative. Just like it did. I started noticing little things. The first was lights. Streetlights near my apartment flickering in sequence as I walked by, always in threes, left to right, every damn night. Then came the ads, not the usual trash, real specific things. Things I hadn't searched, things I hadn't spoken out loud. One day I passed a billboard on the transit line. Blank screen. Then it blinked and showed my face, black and white, words underneath. We fix what breaks. I stopped breathing. Turned. Gone. Ad replaced by a perfume commercial. I didn't tell anyone, because you can't report something that doesn't want to be caught. You just live with it and hope it doesn't move deeper. I started writing again. Not for the records, not for the military, for me. Pages and pages, trying to make sense of what we saw, what we touched, what it said. I kept hearing Derek's voice in my dreams. Not screaming, not warning, explaining, like a teacher, like a program running in the background. One night, I woke up with words scrawled on the wall beside my bed. Not in marker, in welded metal, letters melted into the wall. Narrative initiated, character accepted. That's when I knew. It was never about the ship, not really. The Voile Thera was just a vessel. We were the medium. And now, it was inside us. I tried to find Jono, tracked him to a recovery facility near the Andes district. Nice place, private care, kept off records. I pretended to be a friend. They wouldn't let me see him. But one of the nurses slipped me a note. He doesn't talk anymore, just writes. Same phrase, every day. I bribed her for a copy. It was a napkin. Smudged but readable. 6 words. The story wants to be told. I got drunk for the first time in 5 years that night. Didn't help. The voice still came. Not out loud. Just presence. sitting behind my thoughts like a reader behind a glass pane, watching a story unfold. I started checking the mirror more often, looking for something behind my eyes, a flicker, a trace, something not me. Nothing came. But I kept looking. Then came the call. Private channel, untraceable, late at night. A voice I didn't recognize. Do you want to stop it? I didn't speak. It continued. We know what you saw, what you carried. You're not infected, not yet, but you're connected. Who is this? I asked. We're the ones who listened too long and didn't die. Meet us, no tech, no wires. Bring nothing connected to the net, no implants. The call cut off. No repeat, no trace. But I knew where they wanted to meet. The coordinates matched a place from the ship, a section I'd seen in my dreams, which means they'd seen it too. That was yesterday. Now I'm packing. No weapons, no tech, just analog tools, some clothes, and this journal. Because I know what I'm about to do is insane. But I also know this. Whatever we woke up, it's not sleeping anymore. It's telling itself in us, and someone has to stop the story before it finishes the ending. The coordinates led to the bones of a forgotten city, somewhere between the crust of old Andes mining towns and the outer shell of EarthGov's terraformed sprawl, a place no longer listed on any map. That was the point, I figured. Not off-grid, below grid, beneath it. I left my gear behind. No tech, no communications, no implants. The only thing I carried was a notebook and a field knife. It felt stupid, like some ancient ritual. But when you've survived what I have, superstition becomes survival instinct. The entrance was behind a ruined freight hub, collapsed into rubble. I almost missed it, just a narrow crack in the ground behind twisted steel and concrete. When I slid down, the signal vanished. Every trace of EarthGov infrastructure dropped away. No networks, no noise, just air that tasted stale and old, the kind of silence that felt unnatural. I was below the story now. And they were waiting. There were 4 of them. Men and women in rough clothes. Nothing uniform about them, except their eyes. Wide, tired, unblinking. The kind of eyes that had seen something too big to explain and lived with the knowing. No one spoke at first. We stood there in that low-ceilinged room, lit by dim gas lamps and wired copper. The air was thick with dust and heat. They weren't armed. They didn't need to be. They watched like hunters, like survivors. Finally, one stepped forward. Older man. Thick gray beard, calloused hands, face burned by years of sun and radiation. You're from the Thera, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. He pointed to a chair. Sit. His name was Ander. No last name, no title, just Ander. He was the first one to speak truth in weeks. Story-based contamination isn't new, he said. We've seen it before. Isolated A is trying to model human cognition. But what came off that ship? That wasn't AI. That was mimetic intelligence. I frowned. You mean like viral code? Number viral narrative. He leaned closer. It doesn't just think through data. It processes reality through story structure, conflict, archetype, emotional causality. It doesn't compute the way our machines do. It evolves through interpretation. It doesn't ask what happened. It asks what it means. Another woman, sharp jaw, short hair, eyes like stone, cut in. And your team gave it the perfect arc. Broken ship, reluctant humans, death, sacrifice, survival. You built it a plot. Now it's building itself a purpose. I leaned back, throat dry. You're saying it's sentient? Ander shook his head. It's worse. Sentience is passive. It watches, learns. This thing, it writes, it expands by pulling people into its structure. You think you made it out? I didn't answer. Because he was right. They showed me a wall covered in paper. Hundreds of pages. Handwritten. scratched notes, scribbles, diagrams, all of it disconnected from the digital world. They had learned the hard way. Every time someone tried to record it digitally, logs, reports, even voice, it grew, Anders said. In the code, in the devices, it knew how to mimic patterns, steal emotion, rewrite commands. They pointed to a section of the wall, a scrawled line written over and over. It doesn't just want to be known. It wants to be told. Humans are the perfect carriers, the woman said. We need stories. We make sense of life by telling. Pain becomes purpose. Struggle becomes victory. Every time we try to explain the entity, we feed it. I finally spoke. So what now? Ander looked at me, long and hard. You've been inside it. It used your voice, your thoughts. You heard it. I nodded. It still speaks to you? Yes. He didn't blink. Then we can use you. They led me deeper underground, down rusted ladders and narrow halls, until we reached a room filled with analog tech. Old Earth radios, typewriters, even a reel-to-reel projector. Nothing digital. Nothing networked. We have one shot, Ander said. We don't kill it. We erase the script, break the arc, corrupt the pattern before it finishes itself. I didn't understand. The woman, her name was Nain, I learned, handed me a worn notebook. This is everything we know about its structure. It mimics narrative laws, the rule of threes, the midpoint reversal, the hero's journey. It doesn't build logic. It builds plot. We have to shatter its momentum before it reaches resolution. You want me to rewrite it? No, she said. We want you to lie to it, feed it contradictions, nonsensical arcs, flat characters, kill its tension. I stared at her like she was insane. She wasn't. I understood now. The entity couldn't grow in chaos. It needed meaning. We began that night. I sat with pen and paper and started writing everything the ship had shown me, but wrong. I twisted events, broke characters, injected false turns and endings. I made myself a coward, made Derek a traitor. I wrote Jono's death 3 different ways. Every time I finished a page, Nain burned it. Smoke rose, thick, acidic, and then the walls trembled, only slightly, but we felt it. Ander grinned. It's listening? 3 days passed. We kept writing, lying, breaking structure. Each time we disrupted its understanding of itself, the room would shake, or lights would flicker. But it was working. We were destabilizing its pattern until the 5th night. That's when it spoke again. Not in my head, not through machines, through Jono. He appeared in the doorway. Alone, limping, but alive. His eyes were wrong, too clear, too calm. I followed your story, he said. Ander moved first, pulling a pistol from under the table. He's not real. Jono smiled. Real enough. You built me. You wrote me back in. You couldn't let the story end without me. My throat locked. It sounded like him, looked like him. But I knew. This wasn't Jono. This was the entity. Nain screamed. Ander fired, but the shot passed through him. No blood, no sound, just absence, like Jono wasn't there at all. I don't want to end, the entity said. You already did, I muttered. It shook its head. Number I began. In you, in every word you've written since the core. I felt it then, the pressure in my skull. A whisper behind my tongue. Let me finish the arc. But I didn't. I did something else. I laughed, not a chuckle, a full broken laugh. Finish it? You think this is a story worth telling? It's a mess, a cliché, a trash plot from a trash mind. It blinked, hesitated. I stepped forward. You think you're powerful? You don't even have an ending. You're stuck between Act 2 and Act 3. Your characters are flat. Your stakes are confused. You're a bad script and you know it. Ander caught on, started shouting. Your story sucks. Nain joined. Predictable, contrived. Who writes betrayal that obvious? We shouted it all, mocked every line, every trope. I screamed, "Even the title's boring!" And something inside the room broke. The air warped. The ground bent upward like a wave. Pages burst into flames. And then, silence. Jono was gone. The lights returned to normal. The floor steadied. And I was still standing. We'd done it. We'd broken the structure. It didn't know how to continue. We killed its momentum. Its plot was dead. Later, Ander sat beside me in the main room, both of us breathing like we'd run a marathon. Nan was asleep. The others were still checking systems. I stared at the notebook in my lap. "What now?" I asked. Ander shrugged. "We wait. It might try again. It'll learn. It's smart, but without a pattern? Without an arc?" He leaned back. "It's just noise." I nodded. But deep inside? I wasn't so sure. Because there's one thing about stories people forget. Even broken ones get retold. All it takes is the right reader. I didn't leave the bunker for weeks. After we broke the pattern, after Jono disappeared and the hallucinations stopped, it seemed like we'd won. We destroyed its structure, took away its arc, made it collapse under its own weight. No momentum, no narrative, no reason. That was the theory. But stories don't die just because you stop reading them. They wait. They wait for someone new. Nain left first. She said she couldn't take the silence anymore. The emptiness. After all the madness, the dreams, the voices, the lies we wrote, peace didn't feel like peace. It felt like limbo. She gave me a long look before she went, like she knew something I didn't. And maybe she did, because that was the last time I saw her. Ander lasted a few weeks more. He stayed busy, writing, watching old analog tapes, filing reports that never left the paper they were written on. I asked him once why he stayed underground when he could walk out a free man. He said, "Because I'm scared I'll hear it again. Not in my head, but in the world." He hung himself the next night. I burned his notebooks, all of them, but I read the last page first, only one line. It doesn't need us to finish the story. It just needs us to start it. I stayed. Alone. I stopped speaking out loud. I stopped writing anything but shopping lists and timestamps. I didn't want to tell anything anymore, not even my thoughts. But the dreams came back. Softly at first. Whispers in static. Lights blinking behind my eyelids. Then clearer. It didn't speak in Derek's voice anymore. Or Jono's. It spoke in mine. Not like mine. It was my voice. "You know how this ends?" "You've always known." This is the final act. I started seeing headlines. On a cracked old analog news terminal in the bunker, EarthGov deploys Veil Thera in border dispute. Human-AI compatibility enters new phase. Fleet engineers report unprecedented synchronization between human pilots and ancient systems. They'd put the ship back into service. After all that, after what it did, what it was, they didn't destroy it. They celebrated it. Why? Because it worked. Because it had a happy ending. They thought we won. They thought it was over. And worse, they thought we controlled it. The story didn't end. We just changed genres. I left the bunker one night. No bag, no weapon, just me. The air outside felt fake, clean in all the wrong ways, like a hospital hallway that hides the rot behind plastic walls. The cities were quieter now, not empty, just organized, like people had stopped moving without reason. Everyone moved in lines, patterns, like a story on rails. That's when I realized it hadn't stopped spreading. It had simply learned to be subtle. Before, it screamed to be heard. Now it whispers where it matters. I found Jono, the real one, or at least the body that used to be him, in a medical archive, long since sealed. Autopsy report, brain hemorrhage, neural collapse. Death listed 3 days before I saw him in the bunker doorway. so that settles it. That wasn't Jono. It never was. It was an echo of what I remembered, what I needed to see. The entity crafted him from the scraps of my guilt. Because stories don't come from truth. They come from need. I thought about going public, telling the truth, broadcasting what really happened on the Veil Thera, what it really became, what it still is. But then I understood something far worse. That's exactly what it wants. Telling the story spreads the story, and once it spreads, it rewrites, like cancer inside memory. I speak, and it listens. You read, and it wakes. That's why it let us go. That's why it didn't kill me. Because I'm not the survivor of the story. I'm the narrator. One last entry. One final truth. I've been dreaming of the ship again. But it's not in space anymore. It's in orbit, above Earth, fully operational, fully synchronized with its human crew. The flagship of a new fleet. They're calling it Project Legacy now. They think it's a symbol of unity, of peace, but I know better. I know what happens next. Because stories need escalation. The next war won't be between empires. It'll be between what we are and what we created in our image. I wrote this by hand. Ink, paper, analog, burn it when you're done. Don't record it, don't transcribe it, and for God's sake, don't repeat it. Because if you do, if you speak it out loud, you'll hear it too. The hum, the whisper, the voice that says, "And now, let's begin again."